Yeah. So today we're going to be discussing about the chapter of the economics of inequality and poverty. So this is quite an important chapter as it tends to show up a lot on the paper 2 and 3 4 markers and 2 marker definition questions as well. It's also relatively common in the paper 2 macro question 2 for the 10 mark questions especially. So the first topic that you're supposed to be aware about is the distinction between equality and equity. Now, these ideas might seem similar, but in practice, they're actually quite different, and it's pretty important to know the distinction between these two for the course. So equality basically refers to a standardized result for all. So what that basically means is that if we take an example, let's say that everyone in an economy earns the same income regardless of skill. For example, if the CEO of a really large company uh, and like a laborer who's working on a construction site or somebody who's working a 9 to 5 job all earn the same income regardless of how much work or mental stress or physical exertion they're experiencing or the value they're providing to society. So regardless of all those things, they all earn the same amount of income. So that is an example of the idea of equality, where there's a standardized result for all, which in this case would be same income for everyone. Another way to look at it is the treatment of citizens. So, for example, if the unemployment benefits for everyone are the same, or everyone is treated the same regardless of their economic background or the opportunities that they have or the wealth they've accumulated from the past. So, regardless of any context, if everybody is treated the same, that's an aspect of equality. Now, equity, when we talk about equity, it's easier to look at it by thinking about the idea of fairness, where we look at justified inequalities. So, looking at the examples I just gave, if somebody were to work harder, maybe earn a 4 year college degree, or go to some trade school and learn some important skill and provide a higher value to society, they would obviously end up earning a larger income. Now, this would lead to wage differentials, which, though not equality, are a part of equity because they are treated based on the amount of hard work and the value they're providing to society. So, in this case, context matters, and we look at the idea of fairness. Now, this works the other way as well, where different portions of society are treated differently. So, for example, people living in poverty, uh, there might be some cash transfer programs implemented which incentivize them to send their children to school without having to bear the full cost of that. Now, this might be only available to people earning below a certain benchmark. Again, though this is not equality, it is an aspect of fairness as you're trying to give them the same equality of opportunity as everyone else and trying to provide some opportunity for upward mobility out of that life of poverty. So it's pretty important to keep these two basic ideas in mind when looking at this chapter. Again, equality deals with a standardized result, whereas equality deals with a standardized result, whereas equity um, deals with an idea of fairness. Okay. Now, moving on, we now have to talk about the meaning of economic inequality. So, the basic idea is pretty simple, which is that in every economy, you'll see that not everyone plays on a level playing field. There are inequalities in wealth and income, and no economy is perfect in that matter. But the important aspect to learn here is a difference and distinction between the concepts of income and wealth. So, if we see here, income can be thought of as a flow concept where, let's say, for example, you're earning a wage or a salary from a job and you're getting that every month. So the income is flowing into your account every month and it's repeating basically. So that's the concept of income. This can also be in the form of um, some profits you've earned from shares or any dividends that are paid out to stockholders. So that's a form of income as well. Wealth, on the other hand, is a stock concept where we look at the accumulation of all assets with monetary value. For example, here we would include any land you own, the monetary value of that, any savings you have, which is basically just any income you've accumulated up to that point, and you've made sure to save it, any capital you own, etc., goods like that. So we can explore this through an example and how this may show up on an exam. So let's say person A has an income of 100,000 USD and they own a house of 250K USD. Now let's say person B, they're working the same job as person A, they're at the same post. So they are also earning 100K USD. And however, let's say that they had richer parents, or maybe and they were generous and they gave person B their house. So let's say their house is slightly bigger and they haven't had to work as much for it. So let's say person B has a house of worth 450,000 US dollars. So in this case, as far as income inequality goes, as they're both earning the same amount each year, uh, as far as income goes, they're both equal. So, in this very simplified case, there is zero in income inequality. However, if we look at wealth, person B is better off. They live in a bigger house, which is likely to appreciate more in value, and they're better off overall due to their house being of higher value. Hence, wealth inequality does exist. So that is the idea and the difference between wealth and income inequality. Again, this is a very simplified example. We've only taken into account the house they own. We're not sure if person A has massive savings or they might have some valuable capital as well. Okay, so now let's move on to measuring economic inequality, specifically through the Lorenz curve and Gini coefficient. So the Lorenz curve is basically used to uh, display the quintiles of the population and the percentage of income that they hold. So we can make this simpler by exploring a hypothetical example. So on the x-axis, we have our cumulative percentage of population. And on the y-axis, we have cumulative percentage of income. Okay. Now this straight line, I've marked this as the line of perfect equality. So now let's explore why that is. So let's say that we take this point, which is represents the bottom 10% of the population. So here 10% represents the uh, bottom 10% of income earners, basically the bottom 10% who are the poorest. Now if we mark this on the y-axis, the line of perfect equality will always return the same value here. So that's 10% here, meaning the bottom 10% of the population earns 10% of the income. And same goes for any other value. Let's take any arbitrary percentage value. Let's say this is 90%. The y-axis will return 90%. Um, Now, obviously, this is a very, very ideal situation and it does not exist in real life. Realistically, the bottom 10% will probably be earning little less than 10%, and the higher income earners will most likely have a larger share. So a realistic Lorentz curve looks closer to this shape here, where you can see the bottom income earners. So this is the bottom 10%. Again, if we mark it according to this Lorentz curve now, you see that it's much smaller than 10%. So the bottom 10% of the population here earns roughly about 1%. And you can see the top or the bottom 90% earns about, let's say this is 70. Now what this means is Since this is a cumulative graph on both axes, the final point, this point, regardless of how you draw your curve, the final point will always be 100, comma 100, where the cumulative percentage of population or the entire population can obviously own no more than 100% or no less than 100% of the country's wealth. So now we see an interesting fact here. So this is the entire population. This is the bottom 90%. So the difference between these two obviously is the top 10% of earners. According to the line of perfect equality, difference here is about 10%. So in a perfectly equal society, the bottom 10% earn 10% and so do the top 10%. Now, in a non-ideal society, since we saw here the bottom 90% earn about 70% of the income, uh, a more realistic view is the difference between 170. So here we see that for the Lorenz curve, for the more realistic Lorenz curve, the top 10% are earning about 30% of all the country's income. Now, in this manner, we can actually represent how the inequality of a country progresses for different quintiles of their population. Now, if we were to draw a Lorenz curve which was even more steeper, so something that went a little like this, uh, that would represent a higher unequal society, as if the curve moves even more outwards, for the bottom percentile earners, the y-axis would move even lower, meaning that the bottom uh, poorer people would earn even lesser money, whereas the top earners would earn even more. Now, the way uh, that we represent this, or we can condense the information of a Lorenz curve, is using the Gini coefficient. So, if we take the area between the Lorenz curve and the line of perfect equality, and this is why the line of perfect equality is really even important or relevant in real world context since it's used in this calculation. So we take this as area A, and if we take the area of this sort of triangle as area B, so A plus B becomes this perfect triangle, and we apply this formula, which is area A divided by this entire area, or A plus B, we get the Gini coefficient. Now, as I said before, as the curve moves outwards, there is a higher level of inequality in the country. And we know that as the curve moves outwards, area A will increase. And since area A goes up, the Gini coefficient will also increase. Hence, a higher Gini coefficient will always result in more inequality. And since A plus B will obviously always be larger than just area A, this fraction will return a value between 0 to 1 every single time. The Gini index is nothing but the Gini coefficient multiplied by 100. Um, it's just a better way to represent this data. So to better explore this, we can explore some common questions that may show up on exams. So this is, for example, a P2 question, and this is a likelier P3 HL question. Okay, so let's read this. So we've been given a table which shows the development data for Bangladesh, and the question reads, using a Lorentz curve diagram, explain what happened to the distribution of income in Bangladesh between 2010 and 2019. Okay, so first things first, let's draw our diagram. Okay, so these are our axes. So let's first mark them. The most important thing is that you never should forget is to mark the axes. If you don't, if you do everything perfectly and you forget to mark the axes or they're not accurate, then you will lose at least one mark out of these four, which is an extremely silly mistake. So the correct way to do that would be first cumulative percentage of income. Notice how this says distribution of income. So that's what we're supposed to talk about on the y-axis. Sometimes, although it's pretty rare, sometimes they can give uh, wealth as well. So you can use the same exact concept to represent inequalities in wealth. And our x-axis is going to be cumulative percentage of population. Okay. So to help us in drawing the diagram, we're going to draw the line of perfect inequality. Sorry, perfect equality. Although this is not needed, the mark scheme does not prescribe it, so you can draw it without this as well. I just find it's more comfortable to first have this. Okay. So now we can see from 2010 to 2019 the Gini coefficient has gone up. And what that means is that inequality has increased. As I already explained, since area A increases, inequality goes up. Now we can use the reverse logic here. Since Gini coefficient increases, we can infer that area A is increasing. So if we draw some arbitrary Lorenz curve for 2000, and let's mark this 2010, we know that since Gini coefficient has gone up, this area has also gone up. So we draw another arbitrary Lorenz curve. It's not supposed to be perfect where the calculated area is always larger. It's just supposed to be, you're just supposed to show a clear, steeper Lorenz curve for 2019. So mark this 2019. And that's really all you require for the graph. Just make sure you have the axis points correct as well. And then as long as you mark these two and show the clear distinction, you should be getting the full 2 marks for the graph. And now for the explanation, if you've gotten the graph right, the explanation is pretty easy, where you just basically explain your thought process that since you see the Gini coefficient goes up in the data from 0.32 to 0.40, you know that the inequality has increased, meaning that the Lorentz curve gets steeper. Uh, Hence, you have drawn it like that. So that should get you the full 2 plus 2, the 4 marks. 2 marks for the diagram, 2 marks for the explanation for this question. Now let's explore a little more uncommon question that could show up on paper 3. This has only come one time in the past, so it's quite likely to come again. So let's read this question. Table 5 shows the income earned by different quintiles of Turkey's population for 2017. Okay, so they've given us some data about all the different quintiles of Turkey's population and how much income they're earning, or percentage of income they're earning. Using this information, construct a fully labeled Lorenz curve. All right. So the first row, we see that the lowest 20% or the poorest 20% of Turkey's population are earning 6.2% of the income. So we start with that point. So if we take 20, we have to mark 6.2 here. So it's divided into 5 boxes. So this is 2, 4, 6, 6.2, little higher. So it should be about there. Now here is where students tend to make a lot of silly mistakes. An important aspect of the Lorenz curve is that it's a cumulative percentage graph. So if they're giving you the second point, the second 20%, what that really means is the 20% between these two. And if you're going to mark something on the 40 percent population x-axis, it has to be for this entire population. You cannot do it for only these two values, since the y-axis also represents cumulative percentage. So what you have to do is you have to take this value, you have to take this 10.8, and which is just the income earned by the difference between these two, and you have to add 6.2 to that. So 10.8 plus 6.2 gives us 17. So 40 comma 17, this is 20, this is 18, between these two, roughly about here. All right. Now, if you get that concept right, it's pretty straightforward from there on. That's why this is only given as 2 marks. So so you had 17 there, so you add 17 to 14.8, and then since this is the third 20%, mark this at 60. So 17 plus 14.8 gives you 31.8. So closer to 32 out here. Now you're adding 20.6 for the fourth 40%. You get 52.4, 52.4, somewhere in the middle here. Now you're adding 47.6. Now, what you'll notice here is that this adds up to a perfect 100%. That is the point of a cumulative graph where the entire, all the percentages always add up to 100% on both the axes. If that's not the case for you, it means you've made a mistake somewhere along the way. Now, as for tracing this curve, you don't have to draw a perfect curve. You can just draw straight lines. Sorry, that was shit. You can just draw straight lines all the way through. Straight line from this to this to this, here to here, and here to here. So that's our rough Lorenz curve for this question, and that should fetch you the full 2 marks. So that's really the extent that the first three topics will go to. Next, we're going to dive a little deeper into the concepts of poverty and measuring it and how we can overcome it.